3 men rejected her in the same afternoon. The town watched, whispered, smiled behind gloved hands as Lydia Harper stood alone in the dusty street, her mail-order bride letter crumpling in her fist. The July sun blazed merciless overhead. Her money was gone. Her pride was shattered. She had nowhere left to go. Then a rancher with grief-shadowed eyes and 2 silent children stepped forward and dropped to his knees in front of everyone. What he asked wasn't what she expected. What happened next changed everything. If you're ready to discover how rejection became the doorway to belonging, stay with me until the end. And please, leave a like and comment your city below so I can see how far Lydia's story travels. The stagecoach lurched to a stop in a cloud of dust that hung thick in the afternoon heat. Lydia Harper pressed her handkerchief to her mouth, waiting for the air to settle before she stepped down onto the sun-baked street of Briar Ridge. The wooden planks beneath her boots radiated warmth even through the leather. Everything shimmered in the relentless glare. The storefronts, the hitching posts, the faces of the curious onlookers already turning to stare. She'd traveled 11 days for this moment. 11 days of cramped benches and sleepless nights, clutching a letter that promised her a future. A husband. A home. The paper was soft now from being read so many times, the ink slightly smudged where her fingers had traced the words over and over. Seeking respectable woman for marriage. Must be of good character and willing disposition. Briar Ridge offers opportunity for the right sort. The right sort. Lydia had convinced herself she was exactly that. The driver handed down her suitcase without ceremony, then climbed back up to his seat. "Good luck to you, miss," he said, and something in his tone made her stomach tighten. Before she could ask what he meant, the coach was already pulling away, leaving her alone in the center of town, with the sun beating down and a dozen pairs of eyes watching from doorways and windows. She squared her shoulders and picked up her case. The Grand Hotel stood directly ahead, its paint peeling in long strips from the brutal summers. A small mercantile occupied the corner, its windows displaying bolts of fabric and tin goods. Across the street, the saloon doors stood open, releasing the smell of whiskey and tobacco smoke into the stifling air. Lydia had been told to wait at the hotel. Mr. Patterson would meet her there at 3 o'clock. It was 3:10 now. She made her way up the hotel steps, her skirts collecting dust with every movement. Inside, the lobby offered little relief from the heat. A single fan rotated lazily overhead, stirring air that smelled of old wood and lemon oil. The clerk behind the desk looked up from his newspaper, took one long look at her, and frowned. "Help you?" "I'm here to meet Mr. Patterson," Lydia said, trying to sound confident. "He was supposed to—" "Patterson left about an hour ago." The clerk returned to his paper. "Said he changed his mind." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Changed his mind?" "That's what I said. But I've come all the way from— Did he leave a message? Any explanation?" The clerk shrugged without looking up. "Not my business, miss. You want a room or not?" Lydia's hands trembled as she opened her reticule. She had exactly $3.40 left, enough for maybe 2 nights if she didn't eat. "How much?" $2 a night." She closed the reticule. "I'll need to think about it." Outside, the sun seemed even brighter, even more punishing. Lydia stood on the hotel steps and tried to breathe through the rising panic. Patterson had changed his mind. The man who'd written 3 letters, who'd paid for her stagecoach fare, who'd promised her marriage and security, he'd simply changed his mind. She still had 2 other prospects, 2 other men who'd responded to her advertisement in the matrimonial paper. Mr. Thornton ran the feed store. Mr. Walsh owned a small ranch north of town. Either one of them would do. Either one would be fine. Lydia pulled both letters from her bag and read the addresses. Thornton's Feed and Supply was just down the street. She could be there in 5 minutes. The feed store smelled of grain and leather, dust motes dancing in the shafts of light that cut through the dim interior. A large man in a canvas apron stood behind the counter, writing in a ledger. He looked up when the door opened, and Lydia saw the recognition flash across his face, followed immediately by something else, something that looked like discomfort. "Mr. Thornton?" She stepped forward, forcing a smile. "I'm Lydia Harper." "Lydia, I believe we've corresponded, but I know who you are." He set down his pen carefully. "Look, Miss Harper, I'm going to be straight with you. When I wrote those letters, I was in a different frame of mind. My mother's come to live with me since then, and she's made it clear she doesn't want another woman in the house. I'm sorry you came all this way, but I can't go through with it." The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. "Your mother." That's right. He had the decency to look ashamed at least. "I am sorry, truly." "I see." Lydia's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Thank you for your honesty." She walked back out into the blazing sunlight and stood there, staring at nothing. 2 rejections in less than an hour. She still had Walsh, the rancher. His letters had been shorter, more practical, but he'd seemed earnest enough. His place was north of town. She'd need to hire a wagon. With what money? A group of women emerged from the mercantile across the street, their voices carrying clearly in the still air. "Is that her?" "Must be. Poor thing. I heard Patterson took one look and decided he couldn't go through with it." "Can you blame him? She's not exactly what a man hopes for." "Hush, Beatrice, she'll hear you." Lydia stood frozen, her face burning with something that had nothing to do with the heat. She wanted to shout at them, to defend herself, but her throat had closed up entirely. Instead, she turned and walked quickly back toward the hotel, head down, vision blurring. She made it to the corner before the tears started. Not here, not where they could all see. She ducked into the narrow space between the hotel and the adjacent building, pressing her back against the sun-warmed wood. The tears came hot and fast, soaking into her handkerchief, and she hated herself for crying, hated the weakness of it, but she couldn't stop. 3 letters, 3 promises. And now what? She could go home, except there was no home to go back to. Her aunt had made that clear when she'd helped Lydia purchase the stagecoach ticket. "You've worn out your welcome here, girl. Time to make your own way." The small Ohio town where she'd grown up had nothing left for her. No family, no prospects, no future. Briar Ridge was supposed to be her fresh start. Lydia pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes and tried to think. She had $3.40, enough for one night at the hotel and maybe a meal. Then what? Find work? Doing what? The town clearly had no shortage of women willing to gossip about her. Would any of them hire her? "Miss?" She startled at the voice, young, uncertain, coming from the mouth of the alley. Lydia quickly wiped her eyes and turned to find a small girl watching her, maybe 7 years old, with dark braids and enormous brown eyes. "Yes? Are you all right?" The simple kindness in the question nearly broke her all over again. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just needed a moment out of the sun." The girl didn't look convinced. She wore a calico dress that had been carefully mended in several places, and her face was deeply tanned from outdoor work. "Papa said I should ask if you need help." "Your papa?" "He's right there." The girl pointed back toward the main street. "With my brother." Lydia followed the gesture and saw a man standing near the hotel steps, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a battered hat pulled low against the sun. A boy stood beside him, equally dark-haired, clutching the man's hand. The man removed his hat when he saw her looking, revealing sun-lined features and eyes the color of creek stone. He said something quiet to the children, then approached the alley entrance, stopping a respectful distance away. "Miss Harper." His voice was low, rough-edged. "I'm Daniel Cross. I wanted to introduce myself properly. My ranch is about 6 miles east of town." She knew that name. He'd placed an advertisement in the matrimonial paper too. She'd seen it but hadn't responded. The wording had been almost brutally honest. "Widower with twin children seeks practical woman for marriage of convenience. No romantic expectations. Must be willing to work." It hadn't sounded appealing at the time. She'd wanted something more, something that at least pretended to offer affection along with security. Now standing in an alley with tear-stained cheeks and exactly $3 to her name, practical sounded like salvation. "Mr. Cross." She tried to compose herself, smoothing her skirts with shaking hands. "I'm afraid this isn't the best time." "I know what happened with Patterson," he interrupted quietly. "And Thornton. Word travels fast in a small town." Of course it did. Her humiliation was probably the most interesting thing to happen in Briar Ridge all month. "Then you understand why I might prefer to be alone right now." "I do." He turned his hat in his hand, studying the worn brim. "But I wanted to make you an offer before you leave town. If you're still looking for an arrangement. Lydia's breath caught. You mean marriage? Yes, ma'am. He glanced back at his children, who were watching intently from the street. I need help raising my twins, Emma and Samuel. Their mother died 2 years ago, and I'm doing my best, but they need a woman's hand, someone patient, someone kind. And you think I'm that person? You don't even know me. No, ma'am, I don't. His gray eyes met hers directly. But I saw you come off that stage. I watched you walk into Thornton's with your head up, even after Patterson left you standing. And just now, when those ladies were gossiping, you didn't fight back or make a scene. You just held yourself together. I cried in an alley. You waited until you were out of sight first. Something that might have been the ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. That's dignity, Miss Harper. That's strength. And that's what my children need. Lydia looked past him to the twins. The girl, Emma, offered a tentative wave. The boy stayed half hidden behind his father's leg, but his dark eyes were curious rather than hostile. What exactly are you proposing? A fair arrangement, Daniel said. You'd have your own room until you decided otherwise. You'd help with the children and the house. In exchange, you'd have a home, security, and my name. We'd marry properly, legal and binding, but I wouldn't expect, that is, I wouldn't pressure you for anything you weren't ready to give. It was the most carefully worded proposal Lydia had ever heard, utterly devoid of romance, completely focused on practicality, and somehow the most honest thing any man had said to her in years. Why me? She asked. You could find someone local, someone the town already knows and trusts. I tried that. His jaw tightened slightly. Turns out most of the women in Briar Ridge aren't interested in raising another woman's children. They want their own families, their own fresh start. Can't say I blame them, but Emma and Sam need someone now, not someday. And I think maybe you need a place to belong just as much as they need someone to care for them. The words struck something deep in Lydia's chest. A place to belong. When had she last had that? Not in her aunt's house, where she'd been tolerated rather than welcomed. Not in the small Ohio town that had watched her parents die and then slowly, quietly, pushed her to the margins of society. An unmarried woman with no family and no prospects wasn't worth much in polite circles. She looked at Emma and Samuel again. They needed a mother. She needed a home. Daniel Cross was offering both, with no false promises, no romantic illusions, just honest desperation meeting honest need. When would you want an answer? Now, if you can manage it. He gestured toward the western sky, where the sun was beginning its long slide toward evening. It's a 6-mile drive back to the ranch. If you're coming with us, we should leave soon. You want me to decide right now? Just like that? I know it's fast, Miss Harper, but I saw what happened today. I know you're running out of options. His voice was gentle despite the bluntness of his words. I'm offering you a way forward. Not an easy one, maybe, but an honest one. That's all I can give you. Lydia closed her eyes. The heat pressed down from above, radiating up from the ground, wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. Her head ached. Her feet hurt. Her heart felt like it had been trampled by a team of horses. But Daniel Cross was right. She was out of options. And there was something about his directness, his obvious care for his children, that felt trustworthy in a way Patterson's flowery letters never had. All right, she heard herself say. Yes, I'll go with you. She expected relief to flood his features. Instead, he simply nodded once, replaced his hat, and turned toward his children. Emma, Sam, come meet Miss Harper. The twins approached slowly, Emma leading the way with Samuel pressed close to her side. Up close, Lydia could see they were nearly identical. Same dark hair, same gray eyes, same dusting of freckles across their noses. But where Emma's expression was cautiously curious, Samuel's was guarded, almost frightened. Hello. Lydia knelt down so she was at their eye level, ignoring the dust that immediately clung to her skirts. Your father tells me you need some help around the ranch. We can do most things ourselves, Samuel said quickly. We're not babies. Samuel, Daniel's tone was gentle but firm. Mind your manners. He's right, though, Emma added, though her voice was softer than her brother's. We help Papa with everything. Feeding chickens, gathering eggs, weeding the garden. We're very useful. I can see that. Lydia met their eyes steadily. I'm sure you are. But even useful people need help sometimes. Everyone does. Samuel's suspicious expression didn't soften, but Emma tilted her head thoughtfully. Are you going to be our new mama? The question hung in the hot air between them. Lydia glanced up at Daniel, but his face was carefully neutral, giving her no guidance. I'm going to be someone who helps take care of you, Lydia said carefully. Someone who lives at your house and makes sure you have clean clothes and good meals. Whether that makes me your mama is something we'll all have to figure out together. Would that be all right? Emma considered this seriously, then looked at her brother. Some silent communication passed between them, the kind only twins could share. Finally, Samuel gave a tiny nod. All right, Emma said, but you should know that our real mama was very pretty and very kind, and she made the best apple pie in the whole territory. I'll never be able to replace her, Lydia said honestly. I won't even try, but I promise I'll do my very best to be kind to you both. It wasn't enough. She could see that in Samuel's eyes, but it seemed to satisfy Emma, who nodded solemnly. Okay. Daniel cleared his throat. We should collect your things, Miss Harper. I've got the wagon just down the street. I only have the one case. Lydia stood, brushing dust from her skirts. I left it inside the hotel. I'll get it. He was already moving toward the entrance. You three wait in the wagon. Emma, show Miss Harper where it is. Emma grabbed Lydia's hand with surprising confidence and began tugging her toward the street. Come on! Our wagon's the one with the blue paint. Papa made it himself. Samuel trailed behind them, still quiet, still watchful. The wagon was indeed a painted blue, faded but carefully maintained. Two sturdy horses stood in the traces, their heads lowered against the heat. Emma scrambled up into the back with the ease of long practice, then turned to help her brother. They settled onto a pile of folded blankets, leaving the bench seat for Lydia and their father. Lydia stood beside the wagon, very aware of the stares from townspeople who'd gathered to watch this unexpected development. The same women who'd been gossiping earlier now whispered behind their hands, their eyes sharp with speculation. Let them look. Let them whisper. In a few minutes she'd be gone from this town, heading towards something that was at least honest, even if it wasn't what she'd dreamed of. Daniel emerged from the hotel carrying her battered suitcase. He loaded it into the back of the wagon without comment, then offered Lydia his hand to help her up onto the bench. His palm was rough with calluses, his grip strong and steady. Ready? He asked, once they were both seated. Lydia looked back at Briar Ridge one last time, at the dusty street and the peeling paint and the watching faces. This was supposed to have been her new beginning. Instead, it had been a gauntlet of rejection and humiliation. But maybe that wasn't the end of the story. Maybe it was just the painful middle part, the trial that came before something better. I'm ready. Daniel clicked his tongue and the horses started forward, pulling the wagon away from the hotel, away from the curious stares, away from everything Lydia had hoped for when she'd stepped off the stagecoach just 2 hours ago. The road east cut through open prairie, golden grass stretching to the horizon on both sides. The sun beat down relentlessly, and Lydia was grateful for the slight breeze created by their movement. Behind her, she could hear Emma chattering to Samuel in low tones, but the boy remained mostly silent. Daniel drove with the easy confidence of someone who'd made this journey hundreds of times. He didn't try to fill the silence with small talk, and Lydia appreciated that. Her emotions were too raw, too close to the surface. She needed time to breathe, to adjust, to accept what she'd just agreed to. Marriage to a stranger, motherhood to 2 children who'd lost the woman they loved, life on an isolated ranch 6 miles from the nearest town. What had she done? You're wondering if you made a mistake, Daniel said quietly, his eyes on the road ahead. Lydia startled. I didn't say that. Didn't have to. You've got that look about you, like you're trying to figure out if you can jump off a moving wagon without breaking your neck. Despite everything, a small laugh escaped her. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's worn the same expression. He shifted the reins to one hand, using the other to adjust his hat against the lowering sun. I felt that way the day I married Catherine, the twins' mother. Stood at the altar wondering what the hell I was doing, marrying a girl I barely knew because our families thought it was a good match. Did it work out? Eventually, his voice softened. Took us about a year to figure each other out. But once we did, we were solid. Good partners. Good friends. He paused. I'm not promising you that, Miss Harper. I'm not promising romance or even companionship beyond what's necessary. But I am promising honesty and respect. That's what I can give. Honesty and respect. It wasn't love, but it was something. More than Patterson or Thornton had offered her anyway. Papa? Emma's voice piped up from the back. Can Miss Harper see the creek when we get home? If there's time before supper, Daniel said. Why? Because it's the prettiest spot on the whole ranch, and I want her to like it here. Lydia felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. She turned in her seat to look at Emma. I'm sure I will. The girl beamed at her, and even Samuel's expression seemed fractionally less hostile. They drove on as the sun sank lower, painting the prairie in shades of amber and gold. The heat began to ease, though it was still warm enough that Lydia's dress clung damply to her back. Grasshoppers whirred in the tall grass. Hawks circled overhead, riding the thermals. It was beautiful in a spare, lonely kind of way, so different from the green hills and crowded streets of Ohio. There, Daniel said, pointing ahead. That's home. Lydia followed his gesture and saw buildings materializing from the shimmering heat. A house, a barn, several outbuildings. As they drew closer, she could make out more details. The house was simple but well-maintained, with a deep porch running across the front and shutters painted the same faded blue as the wagon. The barn stood tall and sturdy. A chicken coop, a smokehouse, a root cellar, all the necessities of a working ranch. It wasn't grand. It wasn't even particularly pretty, but it looked solid, real, permanent. Daniel pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and set the brake. Welcome to Cross Creek Ranch, Miss Harper. The twins were already scrambling down, racing toward the house with the boundless energy of children who'd been confined too long. Daniel climbed down and offered Lydia his hand again. She took it and stepped onto solid ground, her legs slightly unsteady after hours of travel. I'll show you inside, Daniel said. Get you settled before supper. Tomorrow we can talk about the practical details. The wedding, what you'll need, how things work around here. The wedding. Right. Because apparently she was getting married tomorrow. Lydia's head spun, but she followed him up the porch steps and through the front door into a dim, blessedly cool interior. The house was spare but clean. A main room served as both kitchen and living space, with a large table, a cook stove, shelves lined with dishes and preserves. Doors led off to what must be bedrooms. The floor was swept, the surfaces dusted, but there was a masculine starkness to everything. No curtains, no decorative touches, nothing soft. Your room's back here. Daniel led her down a short hallway and opened a door to reveal a small bedroom with a single bed, a washstand, and a wooden chest. A window looked out over the prairie, currently golden with evening light. It's not much, but it's private. You can fix it up however you like. Lydia set her reticule on the bed and looked around. The room was austere, but it was clean and it was hers. After weeks of charity beds and boarding house rooms, that was something. It's fine, she said. Thank you. Daniel nodded and backed toward the door. I'll let you get settled. Supper's usually around 6. Nothing fancy, just whatever I can put together. You're welcome to join us, or you can eat in here if you prefer. No pressure either way. He was giving her an escape route, a way to retreat if the reality of her situation became too overwhelming. Lydia appreciated that more than he probably knew. I'll join you, she said. If that's all right. More than all right. Was that relief in his eyes? Emma will be pleased. She's been wanting a woman's company at the table. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Lydia sank onto the bed and finally let herself feel the full weight of the day. The hope she'd carried onto that stagecoach, the crushing rejection from Patterson and Thornton, the humiliation of those gossiping women, the desperate acceptance of Daniel's offer. And now here she was, in a strange house on a remote ranch, committed to marrying a man she'd met 3 hours ago and raising his children. She should be terrified. She should be planning her escape. Instead, she felt something else, something that might have been the very beginning of hope. Through the door, she could hear Emma's bright chatter and Daniel's lower responses. The clatter of dishes, the scrape of chair legs, ordinary sounds, family sounds. Lydia stood and went to the washstand where a pitcher of water and a clean bowl waited. She washed her face and hands, then unpinned her hair and shook it out before braiding it into something simpler. Her reflection in the small mirror looked tired but determined. She could do this. She could make this work. She had to. Because going back wasn't an option, and moving forward, even into uncertainty, was better than standing still in the ruins of rejected dreams. When she emerged from her room, the table was set for 4. Daniel stood at the stove, stirring something that smelled like beans and bacon. Emma was slicing bread with careful concentration. Samuel was folding napkins with the kind of precision that spoke to a child trying very hard to be useful. They all looked up when she entered. "Miss Harper." Emma's face lit up. "Do you want to help? I'm doing the bread, but you could pour the milk." It was such a simple invitation, such an ordinary task, but something about it, about being included, being given a role, being welcomed, made Lydia's throat tight again. "I'd love to," she managed. And as she moved to pour milk into 4 tin cups, as Daniel ladled beans onto plates, and Emma chattered about the chickens, and Samuel slowly, cautiously began to tell her about his favorite horse, Lydia felt something shift inside her. This wasn't what she'd planned. It wasn't what she'd dreamed of on that long stagecoach ride. But maybe, just maybe, it could become something good anyway. The sun hadn't yet crested the horizon when Lydia woke to the sound of a rooster crowing. For a moment she lay disoriented in the unfamiliar bed, staring at shadows on an unfamiliar ceiling. Then memory flooded back. The rejections, the wagon ride, Daniel's quiet proposal over a supper of beans and bread. Today she was getting married. She sat up slowly, her body stiff from travel and restless sleep. Through the window, the sky was beginning to lighten from deep indigo to softer shades of purple and pink. The air that drifted through the open sash was surprisingly cool, a relief after yesterday's oppressive heat. Lydia dressed quickly in her best dress, pale gray cotton with modest lace at the collar, carefully preserved for exactly this kind of occasion. She pinned her hair up with trembling fingers, then stood before the small mirror and tried to see herself as a bride. She looked tired, pale, uncertain. But she was here. That had to count for something. When she emerged from her room, she found Daniel already in the kitchen, coffee brewing on the stove. He'd shaved and changed into a clean shirt, though he still wore his work pants and boots. He looked up when she entered, and something flickered in his gray eyes. Surprise, maybe, or appreciation. "Morning," he said. "Coffee's almost ready?" "Thank you." Lydia moved to the table, unsure what else to say. The weight of what they were about to do hung between them like morning mist. Daniel poured 2 cups and brought them to the table, settling into the chair across from her. "I've been thinking about how to do this. Reverend Miller lives in town. He could marry us there, but that means another trip to Briar Ridge, and I thought maybe you'd had enough of that place for a while." Lydia wrapped her hands around the warm cup, grateful for something to hold. "I appreciate that. There's a circuit preacher who comes through the valley every few weeks. Brother Thomas. He's supposed to be at the Hendersons' place today for a baptism. I sent word last night asking if he'd stay on to perform a wedding ceremony. Should hear back this morning. That's very efficient of you." A ghost of a smile crossed Daniel's face. "I'm a practical man, Miss Harper. When I make a decision, I don't see much point in drawing it out. Even when that decision is marriage? Especially then." He took a long drink of coffee. "I've been alone with 2 children for 2 years. Every day I wait is another day they go without what they need, and another day you spend in limbo wondering if this is real or if I might change my mind like those other men." The directness of it should have been jarring, but somehow it wasn't. Lydia found his honesty easier to bear than false romance would have been. "What do I need to know?" she asked. "About the ceremony? About after?" Daniel set down his cup. "The ceremony will be simple. Just us, the twins, Brother Thomas, and maybe the Hendersons if they want to witness. As for after," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "I meant what I said yesterday. You'll have your own room, your own space. I won't expect anything from you that you're not ready to give. This is a practical arrangement, not a love match. But it will be legal, binding." "Yes, ma'am. I need you to understand that. Once we speak those vows, you'll be my wife in the eyes of the law and the community. I won't take that lightly, and I'll expect the same from you." Lydia met his steady gaze. "I don't take vows lightly either, Mr. Cross. When I commit to something, I see it through." "Good." He stood and carried his cup to the wash basin. "The twins will be up soon. They'll want breakfast before we go. Can you manage eggs and biscuits?" It was a test, Lydia realized. Not a cruel one, but a practical assessment of her capabilities. "I can." "Then I'll get started on the morning chores. Chickens need feeding, horses need tending." He paused at the door, his hand on the frame. "Miss Harper, thank you for saying yes, for being here. It means more than I probably know how to say." Then he was gone, the screen door banging softly behind him. Lydia sat alone in the quiet kitchen as dawn light spilled through the windows. Somewhere in the house she could hear the twins beginning to stir, footsteps on floorboards, the murmur of sleepy voices. In a few hours, she would marry their father. In a few hours, her entire life would change. She stood and went to work. The cook stove was still warm from the coffee. Lydia found flour, lard, and buttermilk in the pantry and began mixing biscuit dough with steady hands. The familiar motions were soothing, cutting in the fat, adding liquid, kneading just enough to bring it together. She'd learned to bake as a girl, standing on a stool beside her mother in a kitchen that smelled of cinnamon and vanilla. That kitchen was long gone now, that life was long gone. But she still had her hands, she still had her skills, she still had the ability to make something warm and good from simple ingredients. Emma appeared in the doorway wearing a nightgown, her dark braids slightly mussed from sleep. "You're making biscuits." "I am. Is that all right?" "Mama used to make biscuits." Emma's voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes were watchful. "Papa tries, but they always come out hard." "These should be better." Lydia cut rounds from the dough and arranged them in a cast-iron pan. "Can you gather eggs for me?" "I'll need at least 6. Emma nodded seriously and disappeared. She returned a few minutes later with a basket of brown eggs, Samuel trailing behind her. The boy had clearly been crying. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face blotchy. "What's wrong?" Lydia asked gently. "Nothing." Samuel scrubbed at his face with one hand. "I'm fine." "He doesn't want you to marry Papa," Emma said bluntly. "He thinks you're trying to replace Mama." "Emma!" Samuel's voice cracked with anger and embarrassment. Lydia set down the egg she'd been holding and knelt so she was level with both children. "Samuel, look at me." The boy kept his eyes fixed on the floor. "Please." Finally, reluctantly, he raised his gaze to meet hers. "I cannot replace your mother," Lydia said quietly. "I won't even try. She was yours in a way I never will be. But your father needs help, and you and Emma need someone to care for you while he's working. That's what I'm here for. Not to take her place, but to fill a different role. Do you understand?" "You're marrying him." Samuel's voice was thick with unshed tears. "That's what wives do. They replace the old wife." "Is that what you think? That people are just replaceable?" He shrugged miserably. Lydia reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wanted to. When he didn't move, she rested her hand gently on his shoulder. "Your mama will always be your mama. Always. Nothing I do or say will change that. But families can grow, Samuel. They can make room for new people without forgetting the ones who came before. That's what I'm hoping we can do here." "Why should we believe you?" The question was belligerent, but underneath it, Lydia heard fear. Raw, vulnerable fear of being hurt again. "Because I'm going to show you," she said simply. "Not with words, but with actions. Every day. Until you know it's true." Emma had been silent during this exchange, but now she moved closer, slipping her small hand into Lydia's free one. "I think Mama would like you. She always said Papa needed someone practical who didn't fuss too much." The vote of confidence was so unexpected that Lydia felt her eyes sting with sudden tears. She blinked them back quickly. "That's very kind of you to say." Samuel pulled away from her touch, but his expression had softened slightly. "I'm still not calling you Mama. I wouldn't expect you to. But I'll try not to be mean. That's all I ask." Lydia stood and returned to the eggs. "Now how do you two like your eggs cooked?" The morning passed in a blur of preparation. Breakfast was eaten quickly, the biscuits disappearing faster than Lydia could have imagined. Daniel came in smelling of hay and horses, his sleeves rolled up, and devoured 4 biscuits with butter and jam while praising her cooking in his quiet way. Then there was cleaning up, getting the twins dressed in their Sunday clothes, braiding Emma's hair while the girl chattered nervously about whether Brother Thomas would remember her from Christmas service. Samuel remained subdued but not actively hostile, which Lydia counted as progress. By the time a rider appeared on the horizon with news that Brother Thomas was ready for them at the Henderson place, Lydia's hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together to hide it. Daniel noticed anyway. "You all right?" "Just nervous. That makes 2 of us." He offered her his arm, a surprisingly formal gesture. "Ready?" She wasn't. She's not even close. But she took his arm anyway. "Ready." The Henderson Ranch was about 3 miles west, a prosperous spread with whitewashed buildings and well-tended fields. By the time they arrived, a small group had gathered on the front porch. Brother Thomas in his black coat, the Hendersons and their grown children, and a few neighbors who'd apparently stayed after the baptism to witness the unexpected wedding. Lydia felt their eyes on her as she climbed down from the wagon, felt the weight of their curiosity and speculation. Did they know about Patterson and Thornton? Had the gossip already spread this far? Mrs. Henderson, a comfortable-looking woman with iron-gray hair, came forward with a warm smile. "Miss Harper, how lovely to meet you properly. I'm Margaret Henderson. Don't look so worried, dear. We're all friends here." "Thank you." Lydia managed to return the smile, though her stomach was churning. "Let me see to the children while you and Daniel speak with Brother Thomas. Emma, Samuel, there's fresh lemonade in the kitchen and some cookies if you're interested." The twins looked to their father for permission. Daniel nodded and they scampered off, Emma pulling Samuel along by the hand. Brother Thomas was a lean man with kind eyes and work-worn hands. He shook Daniel's hand firmly, then turned to Lydia. "Miss Harper, Daniel tells me you've come a long way to be here." "Yes, sir, from Ohio." "A brave journey for a woman alone." He studied her face carefully. "Are you certain about this marriage? There's no shame in taking more time to know each other if you need it." The question was gentle but direct. Lydia appreciated that he was giving her an out, one last chance to reconsider. But where would she go if she said no? Back to Briar Ridge with $3 in her pocket and nowhere to sleep? Back to Ohio to throw herself on her aunt's mercy? No, she'd made her choice. She would see it through. "I'm certain," she said clearly. Brother Thomas nodded. "Then let's speak privately for a moment, the 3 of us, before we begin." He led them to a quiet corner of the porch, away from the gathered witnesses. The afternoon sun was climbing toward its peak, the heat building again after the cool morning. "Marriage is a serious covenant," Brother Thomas began. "It requires mutual respect, patience, and commitment, especially in a union like this, where you're starting from a place of practical necessity rather than romantic love." He looked at Daniel. "Are you prepared to honor and care for this woman as your wife?" "I am." "And you, Miss Harper, are you prepared to accept Daniel and his children as your family?" "I am." "Good." Brother Thomas pulled a small leather-bound book from his coat. "Then there's one more thing you should both understand. A marriage of convenience can become a real marriage, given time and effort, or it can remain merely a legal arrangement. Either way is valid, but both require honesty. If your feelings change, if your needs change, you must be willing to speak those truths to each other. Can you do that?" Lydia glanced at Daniel, who was already looking at her. His gray eyes were serious, searching. "I can," she said. "So can I," Daniel added. "Then we're ready." Brother Thomas smiled. "Let's call the children back. They should be part of this." The ceremony itself was brief and simple. They stood on the porch with the twins flanking them, Emma holding Lydia's hand and Samuel standing stiff and formal beside his father. Brother Thomas spoke about partnership and faithfulness, about building a home together, about the sacred responsibility of family. Lydia barely heard the words. Her focus kept narrowing to small details, the calluses on Daniel's palm when he took her hand, the way Emma squeezed her fingers encouragingly, the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. "Daniel Cross, Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward? I do. Lydia Harper, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward? Her throat was so tight she could barely breathe, but she forced out the words. I do. Then by the authority vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Brother Thomas closed his book. You may kiss your bride, Daniel. The awkwardness of the moment stretched out. Lydia saw panic flash across Daniel's face. They hadn't discussed this part, hadn't prepared for it. The gathered witnesses waited expectantly. Finally, Daniel leaned in and pressed a brief, chaste kiss to her cheek. His beard was rough against her skin, his breath warm. Then he pulled back quickly, relief evident in his eyes. Congratulations to you both, Brother Thomas said warmly, and the witnesses broke into polite applause. Mrs. Henderson insisted they stay for refreshments, cake and lemonade served in the shade of the porch. Lydia found herself surrounded by neighbor women offering advice and congratulations, their voices blending into a pleasant blur. Emma stayed close to her side, clearly proud to show off her new mother to anyone who would pay attention. Samuel kept his distance, standing with his father and the men, but his expression was less hostile than it had been that morning. Progress, Lydia thought. You've done a good thing, Mrs. Henderson said quietly, catching Lydia alone for a moment. Those children need a mother's touch, and Daniel needs a partner. Don't let the gossips in town make you doubt that. You've heard about yesterday, then. Small towns talk, dear, but most of us out here in the valley know that Patterson's a fool and Thornton's a mama's boy. You're better off with Daniel. He's solid, honest, and he'll stand by you. Thank you. Lydia meant it. After the cruelty of Briar Ridge's judgment, Margaret Henderson's kindness felt like water in the desert. The sun was beginning its descent when they finally loaded back into the wagon. Emma was tired and happy, leaning against her brother as they rattled homeward. Samuel was quiet, but he'd accepted a piece of cake from Lydia without complaint, which she took as a small victory. Daniel drove in silence, his attention on the road. But when they were about halfway home, he spoke suddenly. You handled that well. The ceremony, the neighbors, all of it. I'm not sure what else I could have done. You could have panicked, could have changed your mind at the last second, could have made it clear this was all just necessity. He paused. Instead, you made it feel almost real. Lydia looked at him sharply. It is real, isn't it? We spoke vows, we signed papers. That's not what I mean. Daniel shifted the reins, searching for words. I mean, you made it feel like it mattered. Like we mattered, that's more than I expected. The vulnerability in his voice surprised her. This quiet, practical man had expected so little, had hoped for so little beyond the basic transaction they'd agreed to. It does matter, Lydia said softly. You matter. Emma and Samuel matter. I wouldn't have done this otherwise. He didn't respond, but something in his posture relaxed slightly. When they reached the ranch, the twins were asleep in the back of the wagon. Daniel carried Samuel while Lydia guided Emma, the girl's drowsy weight leaning heavily against her side. They settled the children in their shared bedroom, pulling off shoes and tucking them under light quilts despite the lingering warmth. Emma's eyes fluttered open as Lydia smoothed her hair back. Are you really going to stay? I really am. Promise? I promise. Emma smiled and drifted back to sleep. In the hallway, Daniel stood waiting, his hat in his hands. The evening light through the windows cast long shadows across the floor. There's something I should show you, he said, before it gets full dark. He led her outside across the yard to where a small creek ran through a grove of cottonwood trees. The water moved slowly over smooth stones, catching the last golden light of day. The air was cooler here, fresher, scented with damp earth and green growing things. This is why I named the place Cross Creek Ranch, Daniel said. This spot right here. Catherine loved it. She used to bring the twins down here when they were babies, let them play in the shallow parts while she sat on that rock and read or sewed or just existed. He cleared his throat. I wanted you to know about it, in case you need a place to breathe sometimes. Lydia understood what he was really saying. This was sacred ground, a place where his late wife's memory lived. He was sharing it with her not to burden her, but to include her, to give her a piece of what made this land home. Thank you for showing me. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the creek flow past. Somewhere in the cottonwoods, an evening dove called out its mournful song. I know this isn't what you wanted, Daniel said eventually. When you came to Briar Ridge, you were hoping for something different, something better than a grieving widower and two stubborn children. I was hoping for security and a place to belong, Lydia corrected gently. That's what you've offered me. The rest we'll figure out as we go. What if we can't figure it out? What if this doesn't work? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. She turned to look at him directly. But I don't plan on giving up easily, Daniel. I made vows today. I intend to keep them. His gray eyes searched hers in the dimming light. You're stronger than you look, Lydia Harper. Lydia Cross, she corrected quietly. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, then a slow warmth that softened the hard lines of his face. Lydia Cross, he repeated. I'll try to remember that. They walked back to the house together as stars began to emerge overhead. The day had been long and strange and emotionally exhausting, but Lydia felt steadier than she had since stepping off that stagecoach. She had a name now, a home, a family, however fragile and uncertain. It wasn't what she'd dreamed of in those dark hours on the road to Briar Ridge, but it was real, it was hers, and she would fight to keep it. Inside, Daniel lit lamps while Lydia pulled together a simple supper from yesterday's leftover beans and fresh bread. They ate in quiet companionship, too tired for much conversation. When the meal was finished, Daniel pushed back from the table. I'll check on the twins one more time, then turn in. Morning comes early. I'll clean up here. He nodded and disappeared down the hallway. Lydia washed dishes in the basin, her hands moving through warm water while her mind drifted. This was her life now. This kitchen, this house, this family. She would wake tomorrow as Daniel's wife. She would care for his children, tend his home, build something new from the ashes of rejected dreams. The weight of it should have been crushing. Instead, as she dried the last plate and hung the towel to dry, Lydia felt something unexpected. Hope. Small and fragile, yes, but hope nonetheless. She checked the door locks, banked the fire in the stove, and made her way to her small bedroom. Through the thin walls, she could hear Daniel moving about in his own room, the creak of floorboards and the rustle of clothing, the sounds of a stranger who was now her husband. Lydia changed into her nightgown and unpinned her hair, letting it fall loose around her shoulders. In the small mirror, her reflection looked different somehow. Older, maybe. More certain. She was just about to blow out her lamp when a soft knock came at the door. Come in. Emma slipped inside, barefoot and sleepy-eyed. I had a bad dream. Oh, sweetheart. Lydia sat on the edge of the bed and held out her arms. Without hesitation, Emma climbed into her lap, tucking her head under Lydia's chin. I dreamed you left, the girl whispered, like Mama did. Your mama didn't leave on purpose, Emma. She didn't want to go. I know, but she's still gone. Emma's voice was small and frightened. What if you go too? Lydia wrapped her arms tighter around the child and rocked slowly, the way her own mother had once rocked her. I'm not going anywhere. I promised you, remember? And I keep my promises. Even when it's hard? Especially when it's hard. They sat like that for a long time until Emma's breathing deepened and her weight grew heavy with returning sleep. Lydia carried her back to the twins' room and tucked her in beside Samuel, who hadn't stirred. When she returned to her own room, she found Daniel standing in the hallway, clearly having heard Emma's visit. She's fine, Lydia said quietly. Just needed reassurance. She gets those dreams sometimes. Usually I'm the one who sits with her until she calms down. I don't mind doing it. Daniel studied her for a long moment. You're good with them. Better than I expected. They're good children. They make it easy. They're grieving children. They make it complicated. Grief is always complicated. Lydia leaned against her doorframe, suddenly exhausted. But it's also honest. I'd rather deal with honest grief than false cheer. Catherine would have liked you, Daniel said unexpectedly. She had no patience for people who pretended everything was fine when it wasn't. It was the first time he'd voluntarily spoken about his late wife in Lydia's presence. The trust implied in that small revelation made her throat tight. I wish I could have known her. So do I. He cleared his throat roughly. Well, good night, Lydia. Good night, Daniel. She closed her door and stood in the darkness for a moment, listening to his footsteps retreat down the hall. Then she climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling, watching shadows shift as clouds passed over the moon outside. This was her wedding night. In any normal marriage, she would be sharing a bed with her husband right now, beginning the intimate partnership that was supposed to define matrimony. Instead, she lay alone in a narrow bed in a stranger's house, listening to the prairie wind whisper against the windows. But somehow it didn't feel wrong. It felt like the beginning of something, tentative and uncertain, yes, but genuine, real, built on honesty rather than romantic illusion. Lydia closed her eyes and let herself drift toward sleep, thinking about Emma's weight in her arms, Daniel's quiet gratitude, Samuel's grudging acceptance, thinking about the creek and the cottonwoods and the way the evening light had turned everything golden. This was her life now. Her family, her home. And despite everything, despite the pain and rejection that had brought her here, despite the strangeness and uncertainty of it all, she was glad. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. She would have to learn the rhythms of the ranch, earn Samuel's full trust, navigate the complex waters of marriage to a man she barely knew. But tonight, on her first night as Lydia Cross, she allowed herself to simply rest, to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had found the place where she belonged. The wind whispered promises through the darkness, and Lydia let them carry her down into dreams of flowing water and golden light, of small hands holding tight and steady voices speaking truth. Dreams of home. The days that followed took on a rhythm Lydia had never experienced before. She woke before dawn to the rooster's call, dressed quickly in the cool darkness, and was at the stove by the time Daniel came in from the barn. Breakfast was coffee and whatever she could manage, biscuits, eggs, sometimes cornmeal mush with butter and honey. The twins appeared sleepy-eyed and quiet, gradually waking as they ate. Then Daniel would head out to the fields or the livestock, and Lydia would face the endless work of keeping a household running. Dishes to wash, floors to sweep, laundry to scrub, and hang in the merciless sun. The vegetable garden needed weeding, the chickens needed feeding, the milk separator needed cleaning. By midday, the heat would be so oppressive she could barely breathe. But there was always more to do. Emma helped without being asked, her small hands surprisingly capable. She showed Lydia where things were kept, explained her mother's systems for organizing the pantry and the linen closet. Samuel kept his distance for the first few days, watching Lydia with wary eyes, testing her with small acts of defiance, tracking mud across the clean floor, leaving his dirty clothes in heaps, refusing to answer direct questions. Lydia didn't rise to the bait. She simply cleaned the mud, washed the clothes, and continued speaking to him with the same patient kindness she showed Emma. If he wanted to punish her for existing, she wouldn't stop him. But she wouldn't let it change how she treated him either. On the fourth morning, she found him in the barn trying to saddle a horse that was clearly too large for him to handle alone. "Need help?" she asked from the doorway. No. He yanked on the cinch strap, his face red with effort and frustration. The horse shifted, nearly stepping on his foot. "Samuel, you're going to get hurt. Let me—" "I said no!" He whirled on her, eyes blazing. "I don't need your help. I don't need you at all. Papa only married you because he felt sorry for you. And now you're here pretending to be our mother when you're not. You're nothing. You're just some woman nobody else wanted." The words cut deep, but Lydia kept her expression calm. She'd heard worse from her aunt's lips, from the gossiping women of Briar Ridge, from the voice in her own head during the darkest moments of that stagecoach journey. "You're right," she said quietly. "I'm not your mother. I'll never be your mother. But I am here, Samuel, and whether you like it or not, I'm staying. So you can keep fighting me, or you can let me help you saddle that horse before he breaks your toe." He stared at her, breathing hard, clearly surprised she hadn't yelled back or dissolved into tears. "Fine." He stepped back from the horse. "But I'm only letting you help because the horse is being difficult, not because I need you." "Understood." She moved to the horse's side and gentled him with soft words and steady hands, then showed Samuel how to position the saddle properly, how to tighten the cinch without startling the animal. He watched with grudging attention, his anger slowly bleeding into something else. Curiosity, maybe, or the first fragile threads of respect. "Mama used to let me help her in the barn," he said suddenly. "She said I was good with the horses." "I can see that. You've got gentle hands when you're not angry." "I'm not angry." "All right. I'm not." Lydia finished with the saddle and stepped back. "There. He's ready for you." Samuel ran his hand along the horse's neck, not looking at her. "Thank you," he muttered. It was the first time he'd thanked her for anything. "You're welcome." She left him there and returned to the house, her hands trembling slightly. It wasn't much, just a tiny crack in the wall he'd built around himself. But it was something. That afternoon, while Emma helped her hang laundry in the scorching heat, the girl said thoughtfully, "Samuel's scared." "Of what?" "Of forgetting Mama. He thinks if he likes you, it means he didn't love her enough." Lydia pinned a sheet to the line and reached for another. "That's not how love works." "I know, but Samuel doesn't understand that yet." Emma handed her a clothespin. "He loved Mama so much. When she got sick, he stayed by her bed for days. Papa had to carry him away to make him eat and sleep. After she died, he didn't talk for almost 2 months." The image of a small boy sitting vigil beside his dying mother made Lydia's chest ache. "I can't imagine how hard that was." "It was the worst thing ever." Emma's voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes were distant. "I cried all the time, but Samuel just got quiet. Papa said everyone grieves different. Your papa's a wise man." "He's sad too, though. He tries to hide it, but sometimes I hear him at night, walking around the house when he thinks we're asleep. And he doesn't smile like he used to. Not real smiles." Lydia looked at the girl, this solemn child who saw too much and understood too well. "Do you think he'll smile again someday?" "I think so. Maybe when he's not so lonely anymore." Emma tilted her head, studying Lydia with those 2 old eyes. "Do you get lonely?" "Sometimes." "Even now that you're here with us?" "Being with people doesn't always fix loneliness, Emma. Sometimes you can be surrounded by others and still feel alone." The girl considered this seriously. "Is that how you felt in that town? Briar Ridge?" "Yes, very much so." "Well, you're not alone anymore. You're part of our family now." Emma said it with such simple certainty that Lydia had to blink back sudden tears. "And families take care of each other. That's what Mama always said." Lydia set down the laundry basket and knelt in front of Emma, taking both the girl's small hands in hers. "Your Mama was right. And I promise you, Emma, I'm going to take care of this family the very best I can." "I know you will." Emma threw her arms around Lydia's neck in a fierce hug. "That's why I'm glad you're here." They finished the laundry in companionable silence, the sheets snapping in the hot wind. When they returned to the house, Lydia found Daniel sitting at the kitchen table, an unopened letter in his hands and a grim expression on his face. "What's wrong?" He looked up, seeming to register her presence slowly. "Letter from town. There's fever spreading through the valley. 3 families already affected. The Millers, the Johnsons, and the Pratts." Lydia's stomach clenched. Summer fevers were dangerous, especially for children. "How bad?" "Bad enough that Doc Patterson sent word for everyone to stay clear of those homesteads until the sickness passes. He's quarantining the affected families." "We should send food," Lydia said immediately, "and medicine if we have any to spare." Daniel's expression softened slightly. "That's kind of you, but Doc says the best thing we can do is keep our own family healthy. Keep the children away from town, away from other folks. Wait it out." "For how long?" "However long it takes." He stood and moved to the window, staring out at the sun-baked prairie. "Could be a week, could be a month. These things are unpredictable." Emma appeared in the doorway, Samuel behind her. They'd clearly been listening. "Are we going to get sick?" Emma's voice was small. "Not if I can help it," Daniel said firmly. "We're staying put. No trips to town, no visits to neighbors. We have enough supplies to last us a good while." "What about church on Sunday?" Emma asked. "I like church." "No church until the fever passes. Brother Thomas will understand." Samuel's face was pale. The Pratts have kids our age. Billy and Sarah. I know, son. Are they going to die? The question hung in the air, stark and terrible. Daniel's jaw worked, but he couldn't seem to find words that would be both honest and comforting. Lydia moved to stand beside the twins, placing a gentle hand on each of their shoulders. We don't know what will happen, Samuel, but Doc Patterson is doing everything he can for those families, and we're going to do everything we can to keep all of us safe. That means being smart, being careful, and staying together. Mama died from a fever, Samuel said flatly. In the summer, just like now. I remember, sweetheart. So we could die too. We're not going to die. Daniel's voice was rough with emotion. Not if we're careful. Not if we follow the rules. But Lydia could see the fear in his eyes, the memory of loss that made his hand shake slightly as he folded the letter and tucked it into his shirt pocket. He'd already lost his wife to summer sickness. The terror of losing his children the same way must be crushing. That night, Lydia lay awake listening to the house settle around her. Through the walls, she could hear Daniel pacing in his room, his footsteps a restless rhythm across the floorboards. She wanted to go to him, to offer comfort, but what could she say? What comfort could a woman of 4 days' acquaintance possibly provide? She was still lying there, staring at the ceiling, when a small sound made her freeze. A cough. Dry and harsh, coming from the twins' room. Lydia threw off her covers and hurried down the hall, her heart hammering. She pushed open their door to find Emma sitting up in bed, coughing into her hands. In the moonlight streaming through the window, the girl's face looked flushed. Emma? Lydia crossed the room quickly and pressed her hand to the child's forehead. Heat radiated against her palm. Oh no! Daniel appeared in the doorway, clearly having heard the same sound. What's wrong? She's burning up. He was at Emma's side in 3 strides, his large hand gentle on her face. The fear in his eyes was primal, visceral. Emma, sweetheart, how do you feel? Hot. Her voice was small and scratchy. My throat hurts. It's the fever, Daniel breathed. She's caught the fever. We don't know that. Lydia tried to keep her voice calm despite her own rising panic. It could just be a summer cold. Children get them all the time. Or it could be what killed Catherine. Daniel's voice cracked. What if I lose her too? Samuel woke up at the commotion, his eyes wide with terror. Emma? I'm okay, Emma managed, though another cough racked her small frame. Lydia forced herself to think past the fear. Daniel, I need you to get me cool water and clean cloths. Samuel, you're going to help me prop Emma up with extra pillows. We need to keep her comfortable. I should ride for Doc Patterson, Daniel said. No. Lydia caught his arm. You heard what he said. The families with fever are quarantined. If you go to town now, if you bring him back here, you risk exposing all of us to whatever's spreading. We handle this ourselves. I can't. If she dies because I didn't, she's not going to die. Lydia gripped his arm harder, forcing him to meet her eyes. Do you hear me, Daniel? She's not going to die. But I need you to stay calm and help me. Can you do that? He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded shakily. Water and cloths, I'll get them. He disappeared down the hall. Lydia turned to Samuel, who was frozen beside his sister's bed. Samuel, I need those extra pillows from the chest. Can you get them for me? The boy moved like a sleepwalker, pulling pillows from the storage chest and bringing them to his sister's bed. Together they propped Emma up so she could breathe easier, and Lydia stroked the girl's sweat-dampened hair back from her face. You're going to be fine, she murmured. We're going to take care of you. I'm scared, Emma whispered. I know, but you're not alone, sweetheart. We're all right here. Daniel returned with a basin of water and an armload of clean cloths. His hands were steadier now, his fear channeled into action. Lydia soaked a cloth in the cool water and pressed it to Emma's forehead, then her neck, her wrists. The girl sighed with relief. We'll do this all night if we have to, Lydia said quietly. Keep her cool, keep her comfortable. If the fever gets worse, we reassess. But for now, we watch and we wait. I can't lose her. Daniel's voice was barely audible. I can't go through that again. Then don't. Lydia met his eyes over Emma's small form. Stay here. Fight for her. But don't give up before we've even started." Something in her words seemed to steady him. He nodded and pulled a chair close to the bed, settling in for the long night ahead. Samuel climbed onto the bed beside his sister, taking her hand in his. "I'm here too, Emma. I'm not going anywhere." The four of them formed a vigil around Emma's sickbed as the hours crept past. Lydia changed the cool cloths regularly, monitoring the girl's temperature, coaxing sips of water past her cracked lips. Daniel sat rigid with fear, his eyes never leaving his daughter's face. Samuel held his sister's hand and whispered stories to her, tales of their mother, memories of happier times, promises that she would get better. Near midnight, Emma's fever spiked. Her skin felt like fire beneath Lydia's hands, her breathing rapid and shallow. She began to mumble incoherently, lost in fever dreams. "It's getting worse," Daniel said hoarsely. "I should ride for the doctor. I don't care about the risk." "Not yet." Lydia's mind raced through everything her mother had taught her about nursing the sick. "Help me get her nightgown off. We need to cool her down faster." They worked together, stripping Emma down to her underclothes and applying cool water to every inch of her burning skin. The girl whimpered but didn't fully wake. Samuel fetched fresh water when the basin grew warm, making trip after trip to the well in the darkness. An hour passed, then 2. Emma's fever refused to break. Lydia prayed silently as she worked, her hands moving in steady rhythm, even as terror clawed at her chest. She'd made promises to this child. She'd sworn she wouldn't leave. She couldn't break that promise now. "Please," Daniel whispered into the darkness, "please don't take her from me." Samuel had fallen asleep on the floor, exhausted by fear and effort. Emma's breathing was labored, her small chest rising and falling too quickly. Then, as the first gray light of dawn began to filter through the window, something changed. Emma's skin felt fractionally cooler beneath Lydia's touch. Her breathing slowed, deepened. The tension in her small body began to ease. "Daniel!" Lydia's voice shook. "Feel her forehead." He reached out with trembling hands and pressed his palm to Emma's brow. Relief flooded his features. "It's breaking. The fever's breaking." They watched in silent awe as the crisis passed. Emma's color improved. Her breathing normalized. By the time full morning light filled the room, she was sleeping peacefully, her temperature nearly normal. Lydia sat back, suddenly aware that she was shaking all over. Her nightgown was soaked with sweat and water. Her back ached from hours of bending over the bed. But Emma was breathing. Emma was alive. Daniel stood abruptly and walked to the window, his shoulders rigid. For a long moment he just stood there, staring out at the prairie. Then his shoulders began to shake. Lydia rose and went to him, placing a gentle hand on his back. He turned and pulled her into a fierce embrace, his face buried against her shoulder as silent sobs racked his frame. She held him, this strong man breaking apart with relief and remembered grief, and let him take whatever comfort he needed. "I thought I was going to lose her," he choked out. "Just like Catherine, I thought, but you didn't. She's going to be fine. Because of you." He pulled back enough to look at her, his eyes red-rimmed and raw. "You saved her. You knew what to do. You stayed calm. You didn't give up. We saved her. All of us together." "No." His hands gripped her shoulders. "You did this, Lydia. If you hadn't been here." His voice broke again. Samuel stirred on the floor, waking to find his father holding their stepmother in the strengthening dawn light. The boy's eyes widened, but before he could speak, Emma's voice came soft and scratchy from the bed. "Papa?" Daniel released Lydia and rushed to his daughter's side, gathering her into his arms with infinite gentleness. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here. I had scary dreams. I know, but they're over now. You're going to be all right." Emma's gaze found Lydia standing by the window. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed. I promised you, didn't I?" "You kept your promise." "I always will." Samuel got to his feet and crossed to Lydia's side. He stood there for a moment, struggling with something internal, then suddenly wrapped his arms around her waist and pressed his face against her side. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for saving her." Lydia's hand came up to stroke his dark hair, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. You helped save her too, Samuel. You were so brave. They stood like that for a long moment, Lydia and Samuel by the window, Daniel and Emma on the bed, the morning light washing over them all. A family bound together by crisis, by fear, by the fierce determination to protect each other. Daniel looked over at them, and for the first time since Lydia had met him, she saw something like hope in his weathered face. The day passed in careful vigilance. Emma slept most of it, waking only for sips of water and a few bites of broth. Her fever stayed down, her breathing remained clear. By evening, she was well enough to complain about being confined to bed, which Lydia took as an excellent sign. Samuel refused to leave his sister's side except when Lydia forced him to eat and rest. Daniel moved through his chores mechanically, checking on Emma every hour as if afraid she might slip away when he wasn't looking. Lydia held the household together through sheer force of will. She cooked, cleaned, tended the livestock, all while monitoring Emma's condition. Her body ached with exhaustion, but she didn't dare stop. If she stopped, if she let herself feel the full weight of what had almost happened, she might collapse entirely. That night, after Emma had eaten a full bowl of soup and pronounced herself almost completely better, after Samuel had finally fallen asleep in his own bed, after the lamps were extinguished and the house was quiet, Lydia found herself standing on the front porch staring up at the stars. She heard the screen door open behind her, knew without looking that it was Daniel. "Can't sleep?" he asked quietly. "Too much running through my head." He came to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body in the cooling night air. "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For marrying you out of desperation. For bringing you into this without really considering what I was asking. For expecting you to just handle everything." He paused. "You deserved better than that." "Daniel, let me finish." His voice was rough but determined. "When I saw you in that alley, crying because men had rejected you, I saw an opportunity. Someone who needed a home as much as I needed help. It was a transaction in my mind, practical, necessary, but not personal." Lydia waited, her heart beating hard against her ribs. "Tonight changed that," Daniel continued. "Watching you fight for Emma, seeing how much you care about children you barely know, realizing that you've become part of this family in just a few days." He turned to face her fully. "You're not a transaction, Lydia. You're a blessing. And I'm sorry it took me this long to see it." The words hit her like a physical force. She'd expected gratitude, maybe, appreciation, but this raw honesty, this acknowledgement of her worth, it was more than she'd ever hoped for. "I didn't do anything special," she managed. "Any mother would have done the same." "But you're not their mother. You don't have to care this much. You could have helped from a distance, kept yourself separate, honored the letter of our agreement without giving anything more." His hand came up to cup her face gently. "Instead, you gave everything. You stood with us in the worst moment, and you didn't flinch." Lydia closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. "I made vows, Daniel. I meant them." "So did I. But I didn't understand what they meant until tonight." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, catching a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "I want to do better. Be better. Not just as a business arrangement, but as a real partnership, if you're willing." She opened her eyes and found him looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. This was the man beneath the grief and the practical exterior. This was Daniel Cross seeing her, really seeing her, for the first time. "I'm willing," she whispered. Something passed between them in that moment, something that felt like the beginning of something true. Not love, not yet, but the foundation on which love could be built. Trust, respect, genuine care. Daniel leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't move, he pressed his lips to her forehead in a kiss that was tender and full of unspoken promise. "Thank you," he murmured against her skin, "for everything." They stood together on the porch as the night deepened around them, and Lydia felt the last of her fear and uncertainty begin to ease. This wasn't the fairy tale she'd imagined on that stagecoach. It was harder, messier, built on crisis and desperation rather than romance. But it was real, and it was hers, and that made it more valuable than any dream. Emma's recovery was swift. Within 3 days, she was back to her usual self, helping Lydia in the garden and chattering endlessly about everything and nothing. But the fever's passing left something changed in the household, something that went deeper than relief. Samuel stopped testing Lydia with small rebellions. Instead, he began seeking her out, asking her opinion on which horse to ride, showing her a bird's nest he'd found, sitting beside her at meals without the usual wariness in his eyes. He still didn't call her mama, but the word Lydia came easier to his lips now, almost warm. Daniel was different too. He'd always been respectful, but now there was an intentionality to his presence. He lingered over morning coffee, asking about her plans for the day. He came in from the fields at noon to share the midday meal instead of eating alone by the creek. And in the evenings, after the twins were in bed, he'd join her on the porch where they'd talk about small things, the weather, the crops, memories of their separate childhoods, gradually building a foundation of shared understanding. A week after Emma's fever broke, a rider came from town with news. The sickness had passed through the valley like a summer storm, sudden and brutal. 2 families had lost children, the Johnsons' youngest boy, the Pratt's daughter, Sarah. Samuel went very quiet when he heard. He'd played with Sarah at church gatherings, built forts with her in the cottonwoods. Now she was gone. That night, Lydia found him sitting alone by the creek, throwing stones into the water with mechanical precision. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. He shrugged, but didn't tell her to leave, so she settled onto the smooth rock beside him. They sat in silence for a while, watching the water flow past. Finally, Samuel spoke, his voice rough. "Why did Emma get better when Sarah didn't?" "I don't know, sweetheart." "That's not an answer." "I know, but it's the only honest one I have." Lydia picked up a smooth stone and turned it over in her palm. "Sometimes bad things happen, and there's no reason we can understand. No fairness to it. It just is. Mama used to say everything happens for a reason. Maybe she was right. Or maybe she was just trying to make sense of a world that doesn't always make sense." Lydia tossed the stone into the creek, watching ripples spread across the surface. Either way, Sarah's gone. And that's not fair, and it's not right, and it's going to hurt for a long time. Samuel's face crumpled. "I should have been nicer to her. Last time I saw her, we fought about whose turn it was on the swing. I called her stupid." "Oh, Samuel." "Now she's dead, and the last thing I said to her was mean, and I can't take it back." Tears streamed down his face. "I can't ever take it back." Lydia pulled him into her arms and let him cry, his small body shaking with the force of his grief and guilt. She stroked his hair and rocked him gently, the way she'd done with Emma during her fever, and murmured soft comfort into the gathering dusk. "You were a child having a normal disagreement with another child," she said quietly. "Sarah knew you didn't mean it. Children fight and make up 100 times. That's just how friendships work. But we didn't make up. I didn't get the chance." "I know, and that's going to be hard to carry. But Samuel, listen to me. You didn't know this would happen. You couldn't have known. So you have to forgive yourself for being a normal boy having a normal day." "How?" "One day at a time, one moment at a time, and by remembering Sarah the way she really was, not just in that one angry moment. Can you do that?" He was quiet for a long time, his breathing gradually steadying against her shoulder. She liked to climb trees, higher than anyone else. She was fearless. That sounds like a good memory. And she could whistle really loud, loud enough to call her dog from half a mile away. What else? Samuel talked until the stars came out, spilling memories of Sarah Pratt like precious stones into Lydia's hands. And with each memory, some of the guilt seemed to ease from his small shoulders, replaced by the cleaner pain of honest grief. When he finally fell silent, Lydia asked gently, "Ready to go back to the house? Can we sit here a little longer, just until the moon comes up?" "As long as you need." They sat together on the rock while darkness settled over the prairie and the creek murmured its endless song. Eventually Daniel appeared, carrying a lantern, Emma trailing behind him. "Thought you two might need some light to find your way back," he said quietly. "We're coming." Lydia helped Samuel to his feet, and together the four of them walked through the darkness toward the warm glow of home. The next Sunday, despite the lingering fear of sickness, families gathered at the small church in the valley for a memorial service. Lydia had never seen Daniel in his Sunday clothes, dark wool trousers, a white shirt starched stiff, a black vest that made his shoulders look even broader. The twins wore their best as well, Emma in a blue calico dress and Samuel in clothes he was clearly growing out of, the cuffs ending well above his wrists. Lydia had only one decent dress, the gray one she'd worn for the wedding. She'd tried to freshen it up with a clean collar, but she was acutely aware of how plain she looked compared to the other women in their carefully preserved finery. If Daniel noticed, he didn't comment. He simply offered her his arm with quiet courtesy and walked with her into the church as if she were the finest lady in the territory. The service was somber. Brother Thomas spoke of loss and faith, of the mystery of suffering and the hope of reunion. Families wept openly. The Pratts sat in the front row, hollowed out by grief. Mrs. Pratt held a small shoe that must have belonged to Sarah, clutching it like a lifeline. Lydia felt Samuel's hand creep into hers and squeeze tight. She squeezed back, anchoring him through the storm of emotion filling the small building. After the service, people lingered outside in quiet groups. Lydia expected to be ignored the way she'd been ignored, or worse, gossiped about, in Briar Ridge. Instead, women she'd never met approached to introduce themselves and offer quiet welcomes. "You're Daniel's new wife," said a tall woman with kind eyes. "I'm Ruth Henderson, Margaret's daughter-in-law. She told me how well you handled yourself at the wedding." "Thank you. It's good to meet you. We heard about Emma's fever. Word is you sat up with her all night and brought her through it." Lydia glanced at Daniel, who was talking with a group of ranchers nearby. "We all did. It was a family effort. Margaret also mentioned you were the mail-order bride those fools in town rejected." Ruth's voice was matter-of-fact, no judgment in it. "Their loss is Daniel's gain, I'd say. Those children needed someone with backbone." Before Lydia could respond, another woman joined them, younger, heavily pregnant, with a kind smile. "I'm Alice Miller. My Tom says your husband's one of the finest men in the valley, and if he chose you, you must be something special." The casual acceptance, the warmth after so much coldness from the Briar Ridge gossips, made Lydia's throat tight. "That's very kind. It's just truth." Alice rested a hand on her swollen belly. "This valley takes care of its own. You're part of that now. If you need anything, help with harvest, extra hands for canning, someone to watch the children, you just ask." More women approached, offering similar welcomes. Not everyone was warm. Some kept their distance, watching with reserved expressions. But the hostility Lydia had braced herself for never materialized. These were practical people who understood that life on the frontier was hard enough without adding unnecessary cruelty. Mrs. Pratt approached as the crowd was dispersing. Her face was gray with grief, her eyes red and swollen. Lydia expected her to walk past, lost in her own pain. Instead, she stopped directly in front of Lydia and took both her hands. "Daniel told me what you did for Emma," she said hoarsely, "how you fought for her all night." "I'm so sorry about Sarah," Lydia managed. "I wish—" "Don't." Mrs. Pratt's grip tightened. "Don't wish you could have saved her too. Don't carry that weight. You saved the child you could save, and that matters. That's a gift." Her voice broke. "You gave Daniel and those children a gift I would give anything to have." Tears spilled down Lydia's face. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep fighting for the ones you love. Say you'll appreciate every ordinary moment. Say you'll remember that life is precious and brief and should never be taken for granted." Mrs. Pratt released Lydia's hands and stepped back. "That's all any of us can do." She walked away, returning to her husband's side. Lydia stood frozen, overwhelmed by the grace of a grieving mother who could still find it in her heart to offer blessing instead of bitterness. Daniel appeared at her elbow. "You all right?" "I don't know. I feel raw." "That's what church does sometimes." He guided her gently toward the wagon where the twins were waiting. "Cracks you open so the light can get in." They rode home in contemplative silence. Emma dozed against Samuel's shoulder. The prairie stretched endlessly golden under the afternoon sun. Somewhere a meadowlark sang its liquid song. When they reached the ranch, Daniel helped Lydia down from the wagon with unusual care, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for coming with us today," he said quietly, "for standing with me, with all of us." "Where else would I be?" "I don't know, but I'm grateful you chose here." That night, after a simple supper, After the twins were tucked into bed, Lydia found herself restless. The day had stirred up too many emotions, left her feeling unmoored and uncertain. She changed into her nightgown, then stood at her window watching moonlight silver the prairie. A soft knock at her door made her turn. "It's me." Daniel's voice came low through the wood. "Can I talk to you?" She opened the door to find him still in his trousers and undershirt, his hair mussed as if he'd been running his hands through it. He looked uncertain, almost vulnerable. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. He paused, searching for words. "Can I come in? Or would you rather talk out here?" Lydia stepped back, allowing him entry. He moved to the window, keeping a respectful distance, his shoulders tight with tension. "I've been thinking about what Mrs. Pratt said to you," he began, "about appreciating every ordinary moment, about not taking life for granted. It was generous of her, considering." "It was. But it also made me realize I've been doing exactly what she warned against." He turned to face her. "I've been so focused on just surviving each day, on keeping the ranch running and the children fed, that I haven't actually been living. I've been going through the motions." "That's understandable. You've been in survival mode." "Maybe, but you've been here less than 2 weeks and you've already changed everything. The house feels different, warmer. The twins are smiling again. I'm smiling again." His voice roughened. "And I don't want to waste that. I don't want to keep treating this marriage like a business arrangement when it's become so much more." Lydia's heart began to pound. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to really try. Not just coexist, but build something genuine together." He took a step closer. "I'm saying I care about you, Lydia, more than I expected to, more than I probably should after such a short time. And I want to know if you feel anything similar, or if I'm alone in this." She stared at him. This man who'd knelt in the dust to propose, who'd given her shelter when she had nowhere else to go, who'd revealed his grief and fear and hope in equal measure. He wasn't offering her romance or poetry. He was offering himself, flawed, grieving, honest, real. "You're not alone," she whispered. Relief flooded his features. "No? I care about you too. About all of you. This family has become mine in ways I didn't expect." She moved closer, drawn by something she didn't fully understand. "I came here out of desperation, but I'm staying because I want to, because this feels like home. Even though it's hard, even though we're still figuring each other out, especially because of that. Easy things don't mean much, but something you have to fight for, something you build together from nothing, that matters." Daniel reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face in both hands, his calloused palms rough against her skin. "I don't know how to do this, how to open my heart again after losing Catherine. I'm probably going to make mistakes. So will I. But I want to try, with you. If you'll have me." Instead of answering with words, Lydia rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, exploratory, both of them learning the shape and taste of each other. Then Daniel made a low sound in his throat and pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her waist as the kiss deepened. It wasn't like anything Lydia had imagined. It wasn't gentle or sweet. It was hungry and desperate and achingly real. Two lonely people reaching for connection, for comfort, for the promise that life could offer more than mere survival. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight," he said roughly. "Not because you have to, not because of vows or obligation, but because you want to." Lydia's answer was to take his hand and lead him toward the bed. What followed was tender and awkward and deeply intimate. They learned each other slowly, with gentle hands and whispered questions, building trust with every touch. Daniel was careful with her, almost reverent, and when she gasped his name into the darkness, he gathered her closer as if she were something precious. Afterward, they lay tangled together, skin against skin, listening to the night sounds through the open window. Daniel's fingers traced idle patterns on her shoulder, and Lydia felt more anchored than she had in years. "I never thought I'd feel this again," Daniel murmured. "This kind of peace." "Neither did I. Catherine would have liked you, really liked you." He paused. "Is it wrong that I'm glad you're here?" even though it means she's not. I don't think so. I think she'd want you to be happy, to give the twins a mother who loves them. Do you love them? Lydia considered the question seriously. I'm learning to. Every day they show me something new, something that makes me care more deeply. Is that love? I don't know. But it's growing into something that feels like it. And me? His voice was carefully neutral. What are you learning about me? That you're stronger than you think, kinder than you know, that you carry your grief with dignity, but you're ready to put it down and reach for something new. She turned in his arms to face him. That you're a good man, Daniel Cross, and I'm lucky to have found you, even if it took 3 rejections to get here. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips. Those men were fools. Maybe. Or maybe everything had to happen exactly the way it did to bring me here, to this ranch, to you. They fell asleep wrapped together, and when Lydia woke in the gray pre-dawn light, she found herself alone. For a moment, panic seized her. Had he regretted it? Changed his mind? Then she heard sounds from the kitchen. Coffee brewing. The crackle of wood in the stove. She dressed quickly and padded down the hall to find Daniel making breakfast, still in his undershirt and trousers, his feet bare on the wooden floor. He looked up when she entered, and his smile was soft and real and meant only for her. Morning. Good morning. She moved to his side, unsure of the protocol now. Were they different today? Had last night changed everything? Daniel answered the question by pulling her into a gentle embrace, pressing a kiss to her hair. Sleep well? Better than I have in months. Good. He released her reluctantly. I'm making eggs and biscuits. Figured I should contribute more around here instead of leaving all the cooking to you. I don't mind cooking. I know, but we're partners now, real partners. That means sharing the work. He cracked eggs into a skillet with competent efficiency. Besides, you've got enough to manage without doing everything yourself. Lydia poured coffee for both of them, warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the hot liquid. This was what she'd hoped for without knowing how to name it. Not grand passion or dramatic romance, but simple partnership. Shared labor. Mutual respect. The quiet comfort of knowing someone had your back. The twins appeared while breakfast was cooking, Emma bright-eyed and chattering, Samuel quieter but present. They ate together as morning light filled the kitchen, and Lydia felt the pieces of her new life clicking into place. After breakfast, Daniel pulled on his boots and hat. I need to check the north fence line today. Probably be gone most of the morning. You 3 all right here? We'll be fine, Lydia assured him. Emma and I are planning to work in the garden, and Samuel's going to help me with the butter churning. Samuel made a face. Churning is boring. So is complaining, but you manage that just fine, Emma teased. Emma! Daniel's voice held warning, but Lydia could see him fighting a smile. It's all right, Samuel said quickly. I'll help. Lydia showed me a game we can play while we work. Makes it go faster. The casual use of her name, the acceptance implied in it, made Lydia's throat tight. She met Daniel's eyes and saw her own emotion reflected there. Gratitude, wonder, the fragile hope that they were actually building something real. I'll be back by noon, Daniel said, settling his hat. At the door he paused, looking back at the 3 of them gathered around the table. This is good. All of this. Just wanted you to know. Then he was gone, the screen door banging softly behind him. The morning passed in productive rhythm. Lydia and Emma weeded the vegetable garden while Samuel worked nearby, feeding the chickens and collecting eggs. The heat built steadily, but a breeze off the prairie made it bearable. Around mid-morning, Emma sat back on her heels and said thoughtfully, You're different than you were when you first got here. How so? You smile more, and you don't look scared anymore. Lydia considered this. I suppose I was scared at first. Everything was so new and uncertain. Are you still scared? Sometimes, but not of the same things. Lydia pulled a stubborn weed from between the tomato plants. Now, I'm mostly scared of letting you all down, of not being enough. You're enough, Emma said with simple certainty. You're exactly enough. The vote of confidence from this solemn child undid something in Lydia's chest. She pulled Emma into a quick hug, breathing in the scent of sunshine and girl sweat and growing things. Thank you, sweetheart. Samuel appeared carrying a basket of eggs. I got 14. That's more than yesterday. Excellent work. Lydia stood and brushed dirt from her skirts. What do you say we take a break? There's lemonade in the cold box. They settled on the porch in the shade, sipping cool lemonade and watching the prairie shimmer in the heat. In the distance, Lydia could see Daniel working on the fence line, his movements steady and sure. Can I ask you something? Samuel said suddenly. Of course. Are you going to have a baby? The question caught Lydia completely off guard. Heat flooded her face. That's not... Why would you ask that? Because Papa slept in your room last night, Samuel said matter-of-factly. I got up for water and saw his door was open and his bed wasn't slept in. And Mama always said that's how babies happen, when grown-ups share a bed. Emma was watching Lydia with bright, curious eyes. We wouldn't mind a baby. Might be nice to have someone littler than us around. Lydia struggled to find appropriate words. Well, that's... Yes, sometimes when married people share a bed, babies can happen. But not always. And not right away. But it could happen. It could, someday. Lydia took a long drink of lemonade to buy time. Would that really be all right with you both? If there was another child? Samuel shrugged. Like Emma said, might be nice. As long as you don't forget about us. I could never forget about you. You say that now, Samuel said darkly. But babies take up a lot of time. That's what happened with the Millers when they had their new one. Mrs. Miller stopped having time for the older kids. If I'm ever blessed with a baby, I promise you both that you'll still be just as important. You were here first. You'll always be my first children. The word my seemed to resonate in the air. Lydia hadn't meant to claim them so openly, so completely, but now that she had, she found she didn't want to take it back. Samuel met her eyes directly. You really mean that? I really do. Okay then. He drained his lemonade and stood. I'm going to go practice my roping. Papa said he'd teach me some new throws. He bounded off the porch, leaving Lydia alone with Emma. He likes you, Emma said quietly. He wouldn't ask about babies if he didn't want you to stay forever. I'm not going anywhere, Emma. I know, I can tell. The girl leaned against Lydia's shoulder. This is how it's supposed to feel, like family. Lydia wrapped her arm around Emma and pulled her close, watching Samuel practice with his rope in the yard, while Daniel worked in the distance and the prairie rolled endlessly golden under the summer sun. This was family, imperfect, cobbled together from loss and necessity and desperate hope, but real, solid, growing stronger every day, and Lydia knew with bone-deep certainty that she would fight to protect it, nurture it, help it flourish. Because this messy, beautiful, hard-won family was exactly what she'd been searching for all along. She just hadn't known it until she found it. Summer deepened into long golden days and warm velvet nights. The wheat grew tall in the fields, turning from green to amber under the relentless sun. Lydia fell into the rhythm of ranch life as if she'd been born to it, though her hands blistered and her back ached, and some mornings she woke wondering how she'd managed to find strength for another day's work. But she always did find it. In Emma's morning hugs and Samuel's rare smiles, in Daniel's quiet presence beside her as they worked side by side, in the knowledge that she was building something that mattered, something that would last. 3 weeks after Emma's fever, a letter arrived from town. Daniel brought it to the breakfast table, his expression troubled as he read. What is it? Lydia asked, pouring coffee. Patterson, the mail-order man who rejected you. Daniel's jaw tightened. He's written to apologize, says he made a mistake, says he'd like to call on you properly, see if there might still be a chance. The silence that fell was thick and dangerous. Samuel stopped eating mid-bite. Emma's eyes went wide. That's ridiculous, Lydia said flatly. I'm married, to you. I know that, but he seems to think... Daniel's voice was carefully controlled. He seems to think our arrangement might not be permanent, that you might have married me out of desperation rather than choice. He thinks correctly about the desperation part, Lydia said. I did marry you because I had no other options, but that doesn't mean I want to undo it now that I do have options. Daniel looked up sharply. You consider Patterson an option? Of course not. He's a fool who doesn't know his own mind. Lydia reached across the table and took Daniel's hand. But I want you to understand something. I'm not staying because I'm trapped. I'm staying because I choose to. Every single day I choose this. Choose you. Choose us. The tension in Daniel's shoulders eased slightly. You're certain? Completely. Because if you ever want something different, Daniel Cross, you stop that right now. Lydia's voice was fierce. I made vows. I meant them. And I'll be very angry if you suggest I'm the kind of woman who'd abandon her family at the first sign of a supposedly better offer. Emma let out a nervous giggle. She called us her family. We are her family, Samuel said firmly. And she's ours. So Mr. Patterson can go find someone else to reject and then change his mind about. Daniel squeezed Lydia's hand, something like wonder in his gray eyes. What should I write back to him? Tell him Mrs. Cross is very happy with her current situation and has no interest in his belated regrets. Lydia smiled. Or better yet, don't respond at all. He doesn't deserve the courtesy. Daniel stood, came around the table, and kissed her soundly in front of the children. Emma squealed with delight. Samuel made a gagging noise, but couldn't hide his grin. Consider the letter ignored, Daniel said when he pulled back. Now let's finish breakfast. We've got a full day ahead. That afternoon, while Daniel worked in the far fields and the twins played by the creek, Lydia tackled the one task she'd been avoiding, Catherine's trunk. It sat in the corner of the main bedroom, a beautiful carved chest that held the late Mrs. Cross's personal belongings. Daniel had mentioned it once, saying she was welcome to go through it if she wanted, but Lydia had felt like an intruder every time she considered opening it. Now, though, it felt necessary. Not to erase Catherine's memory, but to understand the woman whose place she'd taken, to honor her properly. Lydia knelt beside the trunk and lifted the lid carefully. The scent of lavender and cedar drifted up. Inside were neatly folded dresses, a few books, a painted music box, and bundles of letters tied with ribbon. At the very bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was a wedding dress. Lydia lifted it out with reverent hands. The fabric was cream-colored silk, beautifully preserved, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. It was the dress of a woman who'd been cherished, who'd married for love in a proper ceremony surrounded by family and friends. So different from Lydia's hasty wedding in her plain gray dress. That was Mama's. Lydia turned to find Samuel standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. I'm sorry. I should have asked before. It's okay. He came closer, reaching out to touch the silk. She looked beautiful in it. Papa says she looked like an angel. I'm sure she did. Do you wish you'd had a dress like this for your wedding? Lydia considered the question honestly. Maybe once I would have, but our wedding was perfect for what it was, honest and simple. Samuel sat down beside her, running his fingers over the lace. I miss her, even though it's been 2 years. Even though I like having you here. You can miss her and like me at the same time, sweetheart. Those feelings don't cancel each other out. That's what Papa says, too. Samuel looked up at her, his young face serious. Do you think she'd be mad that Papa married you? No. I think she'd be grateful someone was taking care of all of you. Emma thinks Mama sent you to us, like you were an answer to prayers or something. Lydia felt her throat tighten. What do you think? I think maybe Emma's right. He paused, struggling with something internal. Can I tell you a secret? Always. Sometimes I forget what Mama's voice sounded like, and that scares me more than anything. His eyes filled with tears. What if I forget everything about her? Lydia set down the wedding dress and pulled Samuel into her arms. You won't forget, not the important things. Those are written on your heart, not just in your memory. And whenever you need to remember, you can ask your Papa or Emma or even me. We'll help you keep her alive in stories and memories. You didn't know her. No, but I know she raised a kind, brave boy who loves fiercely and feels deeply. That tells me everything I need to know about what kind of woman she was. Samuel cried quietly against her shoulder, releasing grief he'd probably been holding back for months. Lydia held him and let him take whatever comfort he needed, silently promising Catherine that she'd guard this boy's heart as carefully as if he were her own. When the tears finally subsided, Samuel pulled back and wiped his eyes. Can we keep Mama's dress somewhere safe so Emma can have it someday if she wants? Of course we can. We'll put it back in the trunk, and when Emma's old enough to marry, she can decide what she wants to do with it. What about you? Don't you want it? I have my own dress. Plain as it is, it's mine, and that's enough. Samuel helped her refold the silk carefully and return it to the trunk. As they were closing the lid, Emma appeared with a handful of wildflowers. I picked these for the table, she announced. Papa says Mama used to keep fresh flowers in the house all summer. Then we should definitely continue the tradition, Lydia said. Let's find a jar for them. In the kitchen, while Emma arranged the flowers with solemn concentration, Samuel said suddenly, Lydia, can I call you Mama, if I want to? The question hit Lydia like a thunderbolt. She looked at this boy who'd fought so hard against accepting her, who'd finally found his way to trust, who was now offering her the greatest gift a child could give. You can call me whatever feels right to you, she managed. Lydia is fine, Mama is fine, or something in between if you prefer. What's in between? Some children call their mothers Ma, or Mother, whatever feels natural. Samuel considered this seriously. I think Mama for special times. When I'm scared or hurt or really happy, and Lydia the rest of the time. Is that all right? That's more than all right. Emma looked up from her flowers. I want to call you Mama too. All the time, not just special times. Then that's what you'll call me. But we won't forget our first Mama, Emma said firmly. We'll remember her and love her and tell our children about her someday. Absolutely. Daniel found them like that half an hour later, gathered around the kitchen table with wildflowers between them, talking about Catherine's love of music and her terrible singing voice and the way she danced in the kitchen while making bread. The children's faces were bright with memory, and Lydia listened carefully, building a picture of the woman whose absence had made room for her presence. Daniel stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching. When Lydia looked up and met his eyes, she saw them shining with unshed tears. That night, after the children were asleep, Daniel pulled Lydia onto the porch and into his arms. What you did today, he said roughly, letting them remember her, encouraging it instead of feeling threatened. Not many women would do that. She was their mother. Nothing I do will change that. But you're their mother now, too. In a different way, but just as real. He pulled back to look at her. They asked to call you Mama. Samuel wants to use both names depending on the situation. Emma wants to use Mama all the time. And you're all right with that? I'm honored by it. Daniel kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her mouth. I love you, Lydia Cross. I didn't plan to. Didn't think I could. But I do. The words stole her breath. Daniel, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know. You walked into my life when I'd given up on happiness, and you gave me back everything I thought I'd lost. Hope, joy, a reason to wake up in the morning beyond simple duty. His voice cracked. You're a miracle I didn't deserve. Yes, you did, Lydia said fiercely. You deserved someone who'd stand beside you, someone who'd love your children, someone who'd see you for the good man you are. She cupped his face in both hands. And I do love you. I think I started loving you the moment you knelt in that dusty street and asked me to help raise your children. No one had ever offered me something so honest before. They came together then, kissing with the desperate tenderness of two people who'd found each other against impossible odds. And when Daniel lifted her into his arms and carried her inside, Lydia went willingly, joyfully, knowing she was exactly where she belonged. The weeks that followed were the happiest Lydia had ever known. The wheat ripened and Daniel hired extra hands for the harvest. Lydia cooked for the workers, massive meals that disappeared in minutes, and learned the satisfaction of feeding hungry men honest food made with her own hands. Emma helped constantly, absorbing Lydia's lessons in cooking and sewing and household management with eager attention. Samuel worked alongside his father in the fields, growing tanned and strong, his confidence blooming under Daniel's patient instruction. In the evenings, they'd gather on the porch, exhausted and content, watching the sun paint the prairie in shades of copper and gold. Sometimes Daniel would tell stories of his own childhood. Sometimes the twins would share memories of Catherine that didn't hurt quite so much anymore. Sometimes they'd sit in comfortable silence, simply existing together. One evening in late August, as they sat watching stars emerge in the deepening sky, Emma said thoughtfully, "We should write a letter." "To whom?" Lydia asked. "To other mail-order brides. The ones who are scared and alone and don't know if they should take the risk." Samuel perked up. "That's actually a good idea." "It is," Daniel agreed. "What would you say in this letter?" Emma looked at Lydia. "You should write it. You're the one who knows what it's like." Lydia considered this. What would she tell another woman standing where she'd stood, holding a crumpled letter and a heart full of desperate hope? "I'd tell her the truth," she said slowly, "that it's terrifying and hard and nothing like what you imagine, that you'll be rejected and hurt and have to rebuild yourself from pieces." "That's not very encouraging," Samuel pointed out. "I'm not finished." Lydia smiled. "I'd also tell her that the rejection might be the best thing that ever happened, that the door closing in town might mean a better door opening somewhere else, that a practical arrangement can become real love if you're brave enough to let it." "What else?" Emma pressed. "That family isn't always what you expect. Sometimes it's two grieving children and a widowed rancher who needs help. Sometimes it's built from loss and necessity instead of romance. But that doesn't make it less real, less valuable, less worth fighting for." Daniel reached over and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I'd tell her that home isn't a place you find," Lydia continued softly. "It's something you build, one day at a time, one act of courage at a time. One moment of choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. And that sometimes," Emma added, "the people who reject you are just making room for the people who are supposed to love you all along." "Exactly right, sweetheart." They sat together as darkness claimed the prairie, four people who'd found each other through heartbreak and become something stronger than any of them could have been alone. The next morning, Lydia sat at the kitchen table with pen and paper while the twins suggested additions and Daniel watched from the doorway. She wrote carefully, choosing words that were honest but hopeful, practical but warm. When she finished, she read it aloud. "To the woman considering a mail-order marriage, I write this from a ranch in the Wyoming Territory, where I've been living for 3 months as Mrs. Daniel Cross. I came here after being rejected by 3 different men in a single afternoon. I came here desperate, humiliated, with $3 in my pocket and nowhere else to go. I came here believing I was accepting the last option available to a woman nobody wanted. I was wrong about almost everything. The man who married me wasn't my last option. He was my best option. The children who needed a mother weren't a burden. They were a gift. The life I thought would be mere survival has become the truest home I've ever known. This isn't a fairy tale. There are no glass slippers here, no magical transformations. There's work from dawn until dark. There's grief that doesn't disappear just because someone new arrives. There's the slow, difficult process of building trust with people who've been hurt before. But there's also laughter. There's also kindness. There's also the deep satisfaction of being needed, valued, and eventually loved. Not despite your flaws, but including them. So if you're standing in some dusty town wondering if you made a terrible mistake, if you're holding a letter from a stranger and trying to decide if you're brave enough to gamble your future on it, I'll tell you what I wish someone had told me. Rejection isn't failure, it's redirection. The door closing might be the best thing that ever happens to you, because somewhere out there is a family that needs exactly who you are, not who you pretend to be, not some idealized version of yourself, just you, with all your fears and flaws and fierce determination to survive. Trust the journey, trust yourself. And when you find the place where you're meant to be, you'll know. Not because it's easy, but because it's worth the fight. With hope and solidarity, Mrs. Lydia Cross. Emma was crying quietly. Samuel's eyes were bright. Daniel moved behind Lydia's chair and rested his hands on her shoulders, squeezing gently. "That's perfect," he said hoarsely. "That's exactly perfect." "Should we really send it?" Lydia asked. "To the matrimonial paper?" "We should," Emma said firmly. "Some woman out there needs to read this, needs to know it's possible." So Lydia folded the letter carefully and addressed it to the Western Matrimonial News, the same paper where she'd placed her own desperate advertisement months ago. Daniel rode to town the next day and posted it, along with requests that it be published for other women to read. 3 weeks later, a response arrived. Then another. Then a dozen more. Women writing from all over the territories, sharing their own stories of rejection and redemption. Thanking Lydia for her honesty, asking for advice, sharing hope. Lydia answered each one personally, her letters growing into an unexpected ministry. She became known in certain circles as the woman who told the truth about mail-order marriages, who didn't sugarcoat the difficulties but also didn't diminish the possibilities. As autumn painted the prairie in shades of rust and gold, Lydia realized she'd found something she'd never had before. Not just a family, though she had that. Not just a home, though she had that too. She'd found purpose, meaning, the bone-deep knowledge that her life mattered, that her experiences, even the painful ones, could help others navigate their own difficult paths. One October evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Emma said suddenly, "Mama, are you happy?" The question caught Lydia mid-bite. She set down her fork and looked around the table, at Emma's open, trusting face, at Samuel's more reserved but no less genuine expression, at Daniel's warm gray eyes watching her with quiet intensity. "Yes," she said simply, "I'm happy. Even though you have to work so hard, even though things aren't fancy like in town, especially because of those things. Happiness isn't about having an easy life, Emma. It's about having a meaningful one. And this..." She gestured around the simple kitchen, the worn table, the faces of the people she loved. "This is the most meaningful thing I've ever been part of." "We're lucky to have you," Samuel said, his voice still slightly awkward with affection, but sincere nonetheless. "I'm the lucky one." Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. "We're all lucky. We found each other when we needed each other most. That's not luck, that's grace." Later that night, lying in Daniel's arms with moonlight streaming through the window, Lydia thought about the journey that had brought her here, the desperate decision to become a mail-order bride, the long, uncomfortable stagecoach ride filled with hope and fear, the crushing rejection from Patterson, then Thornton, then the silence from Walsh, the humiliation of standing alone in that dusty street while the town whispered about her failure. If someone had told her then that those rejections were the best thing that could have happened, she would have laughed bitterly. But it was true. Every door that closed had led her here, to Daniel, to Emma and Samuel, to a life that wasn't what she'd planned, but was better than anything she could have imagined. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel murmured, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "About how grateful I am that Patterson changed his mind." Daniel chuckled. "Never thought I'd hear you say that. I mean it. If he'd married me, I'd be in town right now, probably miserable. Definitely not here with you." She turned in his arms to face him. "Every terrible thing that happened led me exactly where I needed to be. I'm glad you see it that way, because I can't imagine this life without you anymore." He kissed her gently. "You've become essential, Lydia, to all of us. The feeling is entirely mutual." They fell asleep wrapped together, and when Lydia woke the next morning to the rooster's crow and the first hints of dawn light, she felt nothing but profound gratitude for the unexpected path her life had taken. The months that followed brought changes. Lydia's letters to mail-order brides became a regular feature in the Western matrimonial news. Women began showing up at the ranch, not many, but enough that it became a pattern. They'd heard about Mrs. Cross, who told the truth, who'd survived rejection and built something real, and they wanted to meet her, to hear her story directly, to find hope in her example. Lydia welcomed them all, fed them at her table, listened to their fears and dreams, offered what advice she could. Some went on to successful marriages, some returned to their families back east, but all of them left the ranch with something they hadn't had before. The knowledge that they weren't alone, that failure wasn't final, that there were different paths to happiness than the ones they'd been taught to expect. Emma and Samuel thrived. Emma grew into a confident, capable girl who helped Lydia with the increasing stream of visitors. Samuel became his father's right hand on the ranch, tall and strong and proud of the work he did. And Daniel became the man he'd been before grief hollowed him out. He laughed more, smiled more, held Lydia close on cold nights and whispered plans for their future into the darkness. 2 years after Lydia first stepped off that stagecoach in Briar Ridge, she stood on the front porch of Cross Creek Ranch, watching a wagon approach in the distance. Another mail-order bride seeking advice, probably, or a family coming to visit, drawn by the reputation the ranch had developed for generous hospitality. Emma appeared at her side, now 9 years old and already showing signs of the beauty she'd grow into. Mama, is that the new family Papa invited for Sunday dinner? I believe so, sweetheart. Samuel joined them, nearly 12 now, and looking more like his father every day. Should I go tell Papa they're coming? Please do. The boy loped off toward the barn while Lydia and Emma waited. The wagon drew closer, and Lydia could make out a young couple and two small children. Daniel emerged from the barn, Samuel at his side, and came to stand beside Lydia. His arm went around her waist automatically, a gesture so natural neither of them thought about it anymore. You ready for company? He asked. Always. The wagon pulled to a stop and the visitors climbed down. A nervous-looking woman in her early 20s, a kind-faced man about Daniel's age, and twin boys who couldn't have been more than 3. Mr. and Mrs. Cross, the woman said hesitantly. I'm Elizabeth Miller. This is my husband Thomas and our sons. I wrote to you last month? Of course. Elizabeth, welcome. Lydia moved forward with genuine warmth. Please come inside. You must be exhausted from the drive. As she led the family into the house, settling them at the table with coffee and fresh-baked bread, Lydia caught Daniel's eye across the room. He smiled at her, that soft, private smile that was meant only for her, and she felt her heart overflow with love and gratitude. Elizabeth was telling her story, something about arriving in the territory with high hopes and facing unexpected challenges. Her husband had been honest about his circumstances, but the reality was harder than she'd anticipated. She was struggling to adjust, wondering if she'd made a mistake. Lydia listened with complete attention, offering the same honesty she'd put into those letters. Yes, it was hard. Yes, there would be days she questioned everything. But there would also be moments of unexpected joy, small victories, the gradual building of something real. I won't lie to you, Lydia said gently. This life breaks you down before it builds you up. But if you're willing to be broken, if you're willing to do the hard work of becoming something new, you'll find that you're stronger than you ever imagined. Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. Everyone else tells me it will get easier. You're the first person who's been honest about how hard it stays. It does get easier in some ways, but mostly you just get stronger. Learn to carry the weight differently. Lydia reached across the table and took the younger woman's hand. The question isn't whether it's hard. The question is whether it's worth it. Is it? Worth it? Lydia looked around her kitchen, at Daniel helping the twins with their coffee, at Emma showing the little boys her collection of smooth creek stones, at Samuel carving something from wood at the far end of the table. At the home they'd built together from nothing but determination and hope. Yes, she said simply. It's worth it. Every difficult moment, every doubt, every time you want to give up but choose to stay instead, all of it is worth the life you build on the other side. Elizabeth left that afternoon with renewed determination. As Lydia watched the wagon disappear into the distance, Daniel came to stand beside her. You're good at this, he said, helping people see the truth without crushing their hope. I just tell them what I wish someone had told me. What's that? That rejection is just life making room for something better. That the hardest paths often lead to the most beautiful destinations. That you don't have to be perfect to be exactly what someone needs. She leaned into him. That love isn't always what you expect, but that doesn't make it less real. Daniel turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face with infinite tenderness. I love you, Lydia Cross. More than I thought possible. More than I have words to say. I love you too, you and Emma and Samuel, this whole beautiful, imperfect life we've built. He kissed her there in the golden afternoon light, and Lydia knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Not in the life she'd planned, but in the one she'd been brave enough to accept when all her plans fell apart. As the sun sank toward the horizon and the prairie turned to copper and gold, Lydia thought about the scared woman who'd stepped off that stagecoach 2 years ago. The woman who'd been rejected and humiliated and left with nothing but $3 and desperate hope. She wanted to tell that woman that she'd survive, more than survive. She'd flourish, that the man kneeling in the dust would become the love of her life, that the children who needed a mother would become her greatest joy, that the home she'd build in the wilderness would become a beacon for other lost souls seeking hope. But maybe that woman had needed to walk through fire to become who she was now. Maybe the rejection and pain had been necessary to strip away everything false until only truth remained. Lydia didn't know, couldn't know, but she knew this. She was grateful for every difficult step that had led her here, to this porch, this family, this life, to a love that had been built from honesty and hard work rather than pretty promises, to a home that had been earned rather than given. And as Daniel's arms came around her and the children's laughter drifted from inside the house and the prairie wind whispered its endless song, Lydia closed her eyes and gave thanks for the beautiful, unexpected journey that had brought her home at last.